You are listening to the Smart Betting Club podcast with me, your host, Peter Ling. Now, this podcast is sponsored by the Matchbook Betting Exchange, and you can find out more on what they offer smart bettors over at matchbook.com. And if you are interested in learning more what it takes to make a profit betting, please do check out my service for winning bettors over at smartbettingclub.com. Hi guys, it's Pete here from Smart Betting Club. A really interesting conversation here in part one. And we actually discussed so much, there's so much insight that Jose had to share that we talked for around 90 minutes. So rather than release it in one 90-minute episode, we're actually breaking it down to make it a little bit more absorbable. So we're going to break this into two 45-minute episodes. So part one is going to follow after this. We're going to talk about all aspects of his work in the sharp betting world, working with betting syndicates. And then in part two, we also explore more on that. We also look at, for example, some listener advice questions about what he might do if you had soft bookmaker accounts, sharp bookmaker accounts, how you would maximize the profits available from that. So if you're interested in sharp betting and smart betting, there's going to be a lot here to enjoy. So enjoy part one and look out for part two, which will be released shortly after. Hello and welcome to the Smart Betting Club podcast. This is episode 83. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by one of the most well-connected and knowledgeable men in the betting world, Jose Miguel Ribeiro, who joins me all the way from sunny Portugal. Jose, great to have you on. You're someone I've been very keen to chat to on the podcast. And finally, you are here. How are things?
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me here. Things are smooth right now. I had a severe injury a few weeks ago, and I still have 6 more therapy weeks in front of me. So I'm basically chilling at home and doing some online contacts. Besides that, all good.
Oh, good. That's good to know. Well, at least you have a job, I suppose, that you can sit behind a computer for the most part and make phone calls and place bets or organize things. So, but let's get into that then. How would you describe yourself and what you do? You've quite a unique role.
I'm a 45-year-old father. I'm in the betting for quite a few years, actually. I started, my background is not in the industry. I did not work in bookies. There were no bookies in Portugal back then. I made my job journey through banking. So I worked banks. I was a branch manager. And then I went to corporate business inside. So I worked with companies. But I was always connected to the game. I still am a chess player. My grandfather taught me chess when I was very young. And then I pivot from chess to poker, beginning of 2000s. So I played a lot of poker in Spain. Spain had a lot of casinos, very aggressive style of players. They didn't know much the theory behind the game, but they were very aggressive, and it was it was not complicated back then to make some money.
Yeah.
And then I think from poker, when poker didn't get so interesting, I pivot to sports betting. I started some friends doing some tennis. I have a background in economics, so maths is something I'm keen on, and I started to do some small, simple models, Bayesian stuff. Over-unders were very, very soft back then, and we could have some advantage over those soft lines, and I started to make some money like that. And then if you ask me when was the moment I was more inside this game, let's call it like this, than my other job, I'm not really sure, but basically I've been doing it double shift for the past 10 years, and then I recently quit the bank, and I'm on full now.
So you're full-time, all in when it comes to betting. So what is it you actually do in the betting world, the betting ecosystem? I've heard you use that phrase quite a lot. Tell listeners about that, because that is the most interesting part right now.
I like to say I have no edge. What I do, I try to capture a signal from someone who actually has an edge, and I try to implement their edge on the market through layers. So basically, most of my work is done on retail. I do a lot of work on retail Spain, retail, some retail in Portugal. And also I have some connections all around the world where we can use the softs ecosystem to try to allow these groups to scale up. And then I also connect with smaller groups, smaller young guys full of ideas, and I try to raise their game. I try to help them to improve. Sometimes you have two, three, four guys. They have a bankroll, they have an edge, but they don't have structures. They don't know how to scale up those operations, and that's what I do. They put me on board as an advisor, and I try to help them scale. Small operations then become more resilient, and hopefully soon one day they can be syndicates. Some of them already are. Others were unable to sustain themselves. That's what I do basically. I'm a jack of all trades, my friend.
Okay. Most people wouldn't ever admit like they don't have an edge themselves. They all rely on other people. So you partner up with originators, smaller groups generally, and then help them in syndicates or people who are aspiring to be bigger syndicates and then help them navigate the system to maximize their profit potential. So we skirted past a lot of how you got to there, which is totally fine. But obviously you have a lot of knowledge and information on the betting ecosystem. Is that just from time in the game, listening to previous chats you've done and talking to myself? You're a deep thinker, you're a learner, you listen, you absorb a lot of information. Is that all part of what you do on a regular basis that's provided you the knowledge and information to help these groups?
Pete, I think when I see the younger guys, I don't have time to lose on X. I don't lose time on social media whatsoever, but I'm curious. I always was the kid that was asking the teachers why this, why that. I think curiosity is an important skill to bring to the game because
Yeah.
you are wondering what if, you are wondering why not. So I think I'm curious and I like to observe the ecosystem, and then I will bring parallels because this is an industry, and as an industry, you have the actors of the industry. And I think that one of the problems I see constantly is that people do their job and they do it efficiently, but that's it, period. They don't know what else is over there. I understand that some characteristics like greedy. Greedy is an important characteristic. If you want to make money in sports betting, you need to be greedy because you need to, most of the times, you need to don't just think, oh, this is a very good play. I have a massive hedge. I'm going to freshen Kelly over here. No, sometimes you need to take risks. Sometimes these type of risks occur, and the people who succeed in the industry, and the ones that now are able not to work for themselves anymore, they could stop. These people in their life, once or twice, they took those kind of risks. So I like to observe and I like to understand what are the characteristics that successful people, successful groups have and others have not. And sometimes I can synthesize that and I can bring it to the game. I can say, look, what if you do things like this? What if you do things like that? When I say I don't have an edge, I don't have an edge because I don't model. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
I might have an edge executing. And I think execution is a very important part because most groups or most kids come to us and they say, look, I have this. And the thing is, are those edges? Yes. Are those exploitable or scalable edges? Sometimes not. So, scalability is the most important thing when you are talking about a syndicate or a success for sports better, because scaling is the difference between the minions and the gods in this business. And I think that's where my edge lies on. I try to help people scale, might use different methodologies, might use different things, but it's what I believe, and so far I'm okay with it, and people seem to be fine with it also.
Very interesting. And I was going to ask you before we get into more in the detail on that, do you bet much yourself or is it more from the other work you've discussed there?
I do bet a lot. I'm not model driven. I bet lower leagues in Portugal and Spain. I tend to use information. So because lower leagues are very granular, data And because they are more difficult to scale, data is not yet strong enough, resilient enough. So I think information and sometimes time being fast, the market allows me to have the possibility to make some dollars. And yes, I still bet a lot, especially lower leagues, and that's my thing. It's a small operation. It's enough for me and my boys, and it's a small operation in size compared to many others, but it's ours. It's lucrative, and I still bet a lot. Yes.
So you have skin in the game, you do your own operations, but you also assist with others. So let's move on to that point then. And let's say you are a smart originator, a modeler, you come up with some kind of model or system where you think, I have an edge. What does that actually look like in terms of how you can help them? Obviously, you're going to, first of all, look at the veracity of that edge, how strong that is, but also then the scalability of it. How would you break that down if you found an edge? You could pick a sport, you could pick a market, maybe use some examples of what that actually looks like in real terms.
Well, that's a very difficult question. I will say this. This might not be the most nice thing to say, but I'm a very direct guy, so no BS. And then you can edit everything I say. But I simply hate steamers. I don't like steamers. And if you ask me why that, it's probably, if I give you time, that's what your question would be. I would say because they are destroying the most important piece of the puzzle. If you want to bet, is to have places where to bet. So if you have an account, your job is not only to make money with that account, is to extract as much money as you can with that account.
Should we explain what steaming is? Do you want to explain for those not familiar? What do you mean by steaming?
I think you can do it. You would do it better than me for sure.
Well, if you take the site like Chasing Steamers or Pinnacle Odds Dropper, they effectively identify moves with Pinnacle, which is the biggest indicator, and then you go and place that bet with a soft bookmaker, and it's a speed game, but it's something that is very obviously and quickly picked up on by many bookmakers, and you lose your account quite quickly, and there's variations around that.
Yeah, I think a common mistake that most people do is like when they start, it's very easy to start with these type of methodologies. And when you are doing these type of methodologies, you are like burning a ring, your most inner ring of accounts, your friends, your family accounts, and then your other family, not so close friends accounts. And then you had periods where you have made quite money. Probably you bought yourself a nice vacations. Some guys can buy a car with this, but then they evolve, they become better betters, and they think, okay, I think I can try to do something here. And now they have a problem because they need to go elsewhere, they need to go to other places, they need to make accounts acquisitions, which is something everybody knows has some nuances. And so they have destroyed all those small factories that they could work for him making his money. So the first thing that I do when I talk to a new group is like I try to diagnose how is their execution. 95% of the groups I work, their first answers are, oh, we are single betters. They single bet. Okay. So where is your edge? Do you have a model? Do you buy data? Where do you buy the data from? And they say, oh, we have very nice data. We buy Opta data and we model with XGs and that stuff. Oh, great. That's perfect. Okay. So what are the markets that you are modeling? And they say, oh, football, for the non UK guys like Canada and United States soccer. And then they say, this is our model. We work like this. And then we will see. So why do you work like this? Why don't you work like that? And so it's a process. It's like trying to help them moving forward, teaching them that betting, it's like any other industry where just you need to have volume, you need to have an edge, a margin. I'm not sure if this answers your question or if you want to go deep inside the rabbit hole, we can go deeper.
Well, I think we can get into some of the examples then. You talked about where execution and that obviously when you place those bets, because yes, what you say, you can do a simple structure, maybe something for the individual where you're going to make enough money to pay for a nice car or something like that. But if you want to build up a scalability with a large group, small group become a large group, let's get into the bet execution. What's the important part of that rather than just, oh, I see the odds here, I'm going to take as much as I can at this particular point in time. Maybe a little bit about the strategy around when and how you place those bets and how you can maximize your edge through that.
I don't remember the last time I single bet. Single bet, especially if you are using such granular markets like I do, it's very easy to tell the bookie trading department where's the good bet. So I think part of the art is to hide the good bets, to give them volume, to give them the bets they want to have. And somewhere you need to print volume into the bets that you want to put volume in. It's like a chess game, and we are talking with the bookie, and bookie's talking with us. So because we use a lot of the retail, if I have an operation and I need to have one or two or three good bets, and I need to put volume around those bets, we probably need to do a combo of things. We need to give them live betting. We need to give them big leagues. And then the main concern that you need to have is not to lose value when you are doing those bets. So basically, if it's zero EV bet and it can bring volume to the table, probably we would do it. We need to see there are nuances. If it's a small EV combined with another EV and another EV bet, then you have a combined EV of those three. Of course, you are combining also the Joyce or the VIG, but that's another story. It's too technical to enter here. But basically, that's it. Execution helps us to hide the game a little bit longer. So
Mhm.
we try not to reveal our hand so quickly to the bookies. And then that's kind of an art, I think.
Definitely. Obviously, many people are aware of the idea of placing sharp bets within multiples and parlays and using them to hide your edge. It's obviously a lot harder to find sharp winning punters if it's hiding in that kind of way. But does variance and bankroll become a part of that discussion then? If you place lots of multiples, for example, like you can absolutely go on longer losing runs. You can have more difficulties on that front. Is that just part of that consideration when it comes to
The drawdowns are huge sometimes.
yeah?
Sometimes we lose money, but you are a golf better yourself. And most of the weeks, you don't have profitable weeks. Probably you will not have profitable months. Eventually, you will not have losing years. So
Yeah.
when you are using parlays, you are not doing one parlay. You are doing 50, 100, 200, 300 parlays. And so you try to reduce the variance through the number of parlays that you are building. So to defend yourself, you need to execute many, many, many parlays. But yes, variance is important. But sometimes variance goes both ways because there is good variance and there is bad variance. And when we discuss variance, we are always discussing the bad variance, the one that hits us.
Yeah.
But sometimes in the long run, variance goes the other way around. And sometimes you have the help of the variance tool. So I think one thing will compensate the other. I think the key question here, cornerstone of all things, is that limits nowadays are getting smaller. Jurisdictions in the United States and Canada, will they be the same in 10 years' time? I doubt it. Will they be the same in 5 years' time? I don't believe so. So I think now you don't have to worry because you have enough to go to a FanDuel and make a straight bet. But what if limits are reduced 50% in some years' time? Then you need to find new ways to explore the edges that everybody is working on. I think a necessity in Europe and especially Central Europe with the legalization of all the markets, the bookies were reducing the limits. Some years ago in Portugal, you had big limits, a lot of juice, a lot of vig in the accounts, but still the limits were so big that they will allow you to make some money. France is another example. Limits are much smaller now than they were like 5, 10 years ago. I'm not going to talk the UK because the limits there are ridiculous. And so I think the way to bet, the execution is so important nowadays that it allows you to hide your hand a little bit and allows you also to solve the limits problems that you have in most of the bookies and providers. So I think this is much more valuable to us than the drawdowns and the problems of having some more extra bad variance on those plays because we can compensate that with more volume.
No, it makes sense.
This is complex, Pete. I'm not sure if
No, it's important. Yeah, I would just imagine positioning myself as an originator potentially with a model. And I think rather than just go and open an account and have it closed down within 2 days because I've won a small amount of money, I can see the edge in teaming up with someone like you who can say, think strategically. You know, obviously a chess player, used to thinking maybe 10, 20, maybe more moves ahead and go, what happens next? What happens after that? What happens after that? Yes, you've won a little bit of money, but how do you get to the point where you win a really big sum of money? How do you think strategically though? That all makes sense to me. I was going to ask you the importance of Pinnacle within all of this. And obviously when it comes to Steam.
I gave you my opinion on the steaming because I think it destroys a lot of the accounts. And especially when people use steaming, they use accounts in their inner ring, their most trusted ring, where they should have those accounts for later to bet on and make money, really money on. But Pinnacle is a very complex question because Pinnacle is changing. And some years, Pinnacle wanted to play a game and they had very smart people. They still have, but a lot of smart people left Pinnacle recently. And I'm not sure if Pinnacle now is the same Pinnacle that we had like 4, 5, 6 years ago. If you are talking about US sports, I think soccer. I think the boys from Planet Tech and what they're doing on those bookies over there are very sharp. I'm not so sure if Pinnacle could be or can be considered as sharp as Circa, for instance, or the other. Not recalling the name now, but the thing is, Pinnacle acts sometimes like a syndicate. It's not like a bookie. I'm pretty sure Pinnacle wants to be in the game, wants to bet. They bet. It's not just a bookie that wants to put money in one side or the other. They just bet. And I'm sure that sometimes they allow, and that's where your where question will be directed. I'm pretty sure they allow themselves to move the price so the market moves the price because they know that they are receiving bad money and the bookies that are going to be hit on the weak side of the bookie are elsewhere. So the manipulation of things, Pinnacle now is strange. I don't think is as good as a reference as it was before because if I'm working with basketball, European basketball syndicate, or if I'm trying to do some bets from someone from European basketball, their reference is not Pinnacle nowadays. It's Bet365, and the behavior of Bet365 sometimes induces much more variation on the prices than Pinnacle itself. So if you are thinking Pinnacle as a market maker, maybe soccer, maybe football, yes. All the other sports, well, maybe, but not as much as it was used to be. And so I think they are more a bookie now than they were before. I think they are now. I would not be surprised if in 2 years' time or whatever, Pinnacle started to restrict customers. That's something they don't do.
Okay.
They might restrict markets. They might restrict leagues where they could get severely damaged by someone with big hedges. But they have never restricted a player. They have learned from those players. But I'm not quite sure if that's their business model in the next years. And I'm very curious about it.
Fascinating. Well, again, it goes back to strategical thinking. So if I'm an originator in a sport, like you say, like European basketball, you would advise them and say, look, Pinnacle's not necessarily the benchmark, the be all and end all. So again, we go back to that knowledge and information. It's really interesting to hear.
Just one more thing I think will make it things more clear. When you are trying to extract money from a bookie, you need to understand not only that you have an edge, not only that your edge is exploitable and scalable, but you need to understand what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the bookie or the bookies itself. So bookies have different characteristics. Their trading departments have different people and they understand things on a different way. So maybe if you are using a brand and you know that they don't like to be hit before 24 hours to KO because they will limit the accounts or the limits are much slower, maybe sometimes you need to sacrifice a little bit of your edge in order to have other aspects of it. And so I think when you are now making bet, constructing a bet, building a bet, structuring a bet, I don't know the name for it, but when you are trying to do some work on a bet, there are 3 or 4 balances you need to see. When does Pinnacle price comes out? How's the Betfair market? Is the Betfair market still illiquid or not? But Bet365 is very important for those European handball, basketball, some lower tennis. It's very important because Pinnacle is not in the game yet. And so, because we are trying to scale and put money down in operations on the ground, Bet365 is the holy grail, cannot be touched. If it's touched, it affects us. Sometimes Pinnacle, you need to understand the movement. Because is that movement a fake movement? What's the movement? You need to think a little bit more. But I can maintain what I have said before. I would be very curious for what's the Pinnacle behavior in the next years to come, because the game is different now, and I think they might do something new for a change.
Well, watch with interest, see if your prediction comes true. We'll see what changes with regard to Pinnacle. This podcast is sponsored by the Matchbook betting exchange. When it comes to betting exchanges, Matchbook has been my personal go-to for some time now. Using horse racing as an example, they've offered the best prices on the most runners this year, which can make a big difference to your bottom line. Plus, with an industry-leading score of 4.2 on Trustpilot, you know you're in safe hands. Download the Matchbook Betting Exchange app or go to matchbook.com today. And if you enter the code SBC150, that's SBC150 on sign up, you can get commission free for your first 150 days, which can give you even more value. If you need to place a larger or more bespoke bet, or are indeed a corporate or operator client, their brokerage service is excellent and available 365 days a year. For more details, email the team at brokerage@matchbook.com. Matchbook Betting Exchange is for bettors who know better. I want to ask you as well about closing line value, CLV. We use that, it's important to you, but also how you benchmark edges and maintain they're still there and how to maximize them. Do you use CLV yourself? Is that a fundamental part of your analysis?
I use CLV to track every single bet that we do. I don't use CLV for the volume bets that we do because that's basically nil CLV. But I think that everybody talks about CLV. Yes, CLV is important, but I'm driven by process. I think you should always analyze your process. I think every week after on Mondays are the settlement days. And when I'm doing the settlements, I'm reviewing what have we done. I'm reviewing which bets were good, which bets were not so good. And then I try to see the bets that were not so good, why weren't they good? I'm not just talking about CLV because sometimes you can have a very good bet and you just cannot put money on that bet because sometimes we have done it too late, sometimes too soon. Sometimes we should have done it with 3 4 legs parlays and we try to put that in systems because of the execution that we use. I'm much more driven in the process than to focus on the single aspect of the CLV. I can give you an example. You have a bet, a very good bet, football bet or soccer bet. European odds, they are at evens, closing line perfectly, beautifully. At the KO, that price is 180. So you have done your job, and then something happens and the price moves. Players get injured on the first minute or whatever. And so you have done your work correctly, and you might have had some CLV. Even sometimes in lineups, you have surprises. Some things that are not normal happen, and the price. Some players in some teams, some players maybe are more than 20 points. I remember Ronaldo some years back. I was working with some guys, and it was during COVID, and we had a great information. And Ronaldo had COVID, and Portugal was going to play Sweden, and Ronaldo was out. No one knew back then what was the player, but we had some information from the guys, the journalists that were there, and they were going to know maybe some minutes prior. And one of them texted me, and he texted me CR7. So the player was out, was Ronaldo. We had a position in Portugal, and we need to make a decision because Ronaldo was not going to play, and Ronaldo for us was 30 points. And he was the penalty taker, he was the most important player. And so we black flipped the position, we laid Portugal. Prices were came to us. We were right on the price, and we lost the bet because that's one of the best games Portugal has made with all the young talented players we had, and they smashed. I don't recall if it was 3-0 or 4-0 that game, and we lost a massive bet where we were in possession of all the information. So CLV is important if you are in the NBA in very liquid markets. Process and execution for me are more important in more granular markets, or at least as important as. I don't want to get in any debates about CLV with anybody on X. Please don't do that
You
to
don't,
me.
you don't do that. You don't waste your time.
No, I don't waste my time with that, but I understand CLV. I think if you have a beautiful execution and if you have a very good way to go into the market in the right time, then you can make a lot of money. CLV is not everything because CLV can be affected by several things that you do not control. And so, as a measure, I think your process needs more than CLV. If you are just holding on to CLV, you are losing things. You are losing execution and time to market, I think. It's very important because look, if you go to Blogabet and you go and you say, oh, I want to follow a tipster, and then you go to Blogabet or any other of these websites with tipsters, if you are following a tipster and you know this because you work in this area for long, if you are following a tipster that the first bookie, the first price, he has a bet on that price, you know that no one can follow that tipster because that price does not exist. Even if Pinnacle has $100 in the market, it's too weak. The market is too
Yep.
inexistent. So you need to combine several things, not only CLV. So I have the same opinion about CLV that I have about, maybe not so bad, but I have about the steaming. So I think CLV is important, yes, but the guys who really make money in this industry are the guys who are winning with no CLV.
Yeah.
And there are many guys out there doing this.
Because there's no way to find.
It's not difficult to find. They are out there and they can win with no CLV or with residual CLV. But that's another question.
It's another topic, isn't it? But
Yes.
I think the general gist of what you're saying is you've got to be strategical. You can't just rest everything on the way you place the bets. You've got to think about everything from that point of view and the execution.
I think we started this conversation by me saying that curiosity is important. I think looking at the CLV is not curious. It's like mechanic. Curiosity is taking a look at a bet and saying, what could I have done better? Next week, I'm going to try this. And then sometimes edges appear because sometimes bookies allow you to combine markets where that you were not supposed to, or because you combine different things. I'm going to throw something. Recently, I found out that I could put more money inside a parlay if was using a live game. And that was because we were curious. We were okay, we need to prime this. Always questioning the process, being curious about the process is the way you make more money and you evolve and you shift. And now you are doing something, and 6 months forward, you are doing something completely different. And you look back and you say, yeah, I was doing the best thing I could do back then, but now I'm doing this and I'm okay. And then 2 years from now, yeah, you are going to do another thing. I think curiosity and constant process analysis is more important than CLV.
It's a good point. I think reflecting my own betting, certainly not to the scale of some of those big groups, but just from that curiosity point of view, what happens if I place this bet in a different type of parlay, like you say, with a live bet or an SGP of some kind? Do the limits increase? How does the edge change? How is this bet likely to be viewed? Do I take it a day earlier, a day later, in a different way? And I think that's really important. So I think for those listening, that takeaway is really good to have. Don't just do something because it works. Think about, or it has worked to a point, think about how you can improve it. And if there are other ways, can you play around with it? Maybe you'll find something that you didn't know existed, and then you can take advantage of that. I think that's a really salient point there that you raise. I was going to ask you as well, as we're talking about some of these groups and syndicates. I mean, you probably covered a few of these points already, but what do the best ones do, and what do the what do the ones with flaws do wrong? What can, especially just some key points, like what should people consider, or things to consider and things not to do as well?
Difficult to answer. I don't see these
It's a very
groups.
general question, I
No,
know.
yeah, but
Yeah.
no, it's not that. It's just these groups are very good. They are very sharp. They don't do much things wrong. I don't think they even do things wrong. I think they do what I have said before. They are constantly analyzing and evolving. The ecosystem changes.
Yeah.
Book is changing. Legalization in most of the jurisdictions brought changes to the table.
So that's a good point. So have you seen some of the bigger groups be too big, too slow to maneuver, to change, to adapt? Is that part of their issue?
Oh boy, this is complex. I think medium sized groups can be more efficient because their operations are more shiftable. They can change more fast. So they don't have so many people inside, they don't have so many salaries to pay. And so if they want to move and they want to go and to move to another ecosystem and they want to put the team working in Australia or whatever, they can do it. I think the big groups have a big challenge because the liquidity is not as much as it was some years ago. And so I think position taking now is key. So you have places where the big groups bet against each other. So it's like model against model. You take a look at Betfair. Nowadays, Betfair is a model from one group against a bot from another group. It's very strange what the soft, the not so sharp bettors are leaving the Betfair model. And so the market makers that are over there making those prices are very efficient. They are very good. So I think now the big groups need to have bookies. They need to lay bets from others, smaller groups. I know syndicates that lay every bet below 5K. And that's it. They just don't waste time in analyzing if it's a good or a bad bet. If you're sending them a 5K bet, they just lay it. And so it's a very complex dynamics because COVID made a lot of changes. COVID made a lot of changes in the Asian market because we lost a lot of volume in the Asian market. But I think soon, especially in some Arabic countries, we will have some surprises. I think we can have good surprises for some places on the Middle East. and it might bring some another changes in the world. I think it's a very nice time to make money in the United States and Canada. And so I think the bigger groups, what they need to do or what they are doing is they are eating more than one ecosystem. I think they need to shift. But if you ask me which are the groups that are making more money or potentially they are making more money on ROI perspective, are the second and third tier groups.
Yeah.
The second and third tier groups are for sure making a lot of money because their cost structure is different.
Interesting. I also want to ask you then about some of the other aspects of being in that world. Trust. It's important because you're often working on a lot of trust basis in terms of money and bet placement for you and all of that. And then obviously those issues that come up where people don't pay or terms like being stiffed or being knocked, being let down for money that's owed. How often does that take place? Or how big a concern is that when it comes to the syndicate world and how you advise people?
When you are saying stiff, you are saying groups don't pay other groups, correct? That's what you are addressing.
Or movers,
movers,
whatever it might be. Movers not paying originators or syndicates, the transfer of money.
Okay, bookies sometimes don't pay. So it's like,
yeah.
Trust is equity in this business. That's something I'm always saying. Trust equals equity.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can see guys slow paying others because they were stiffed or bookie didn't pay or whatever. And if the guys are straight and they say, oh, look, we cannot pay because this and that, but I'm going to send you this every week, it's all good because people had a conversation. They didn't bullshit. They just say what were on their minds. I think the problem sometimes, especially when you are using different ecosystems, is that sometimes people they stiff because they want to, but then that's part of the process. You know that some of the money you are making, you are not going to get paid. Everybody knows it's going to be stiff.
It's just a cost of business. You've got to expect a certain amount of slippage.
Yeah, you need to have some costs. When you are building an operation somewhere, you just know that you need to have some costs. Some costs are like maybe 20% of the operations sometimes.
Wow.
But sometimes it still compensates, sometimes it still compensates. It's complex. You need to see this like almost body by body. What is happening here? Okay, we lost. This guy didn't get paid. Oh, this client won. I need to pay to this client, but the bookie didn't pay me. All of this balance, you need to have money aside to these things because it's going to happen. Everybody is going to get stiff. And I think now more than ever, it's important for people that want to create operations elsewhere. I have good guys, very good guys, and I'm moving for very good guys. And the first thing I say to a guy, if he's good and if he has a good card, first we have a call and a Google Meet. And then I say, okay, where do you live? Let's meet somewhere. Let's meet halfway. Let's take a plane to Brussels and meet there. Let's talk. And after this, if the guy says, no, I don't want to meet. Okay. Then I need to evaluate if I want to be in business with this person or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because I might not be interested. Because the chances of not getting paid by someone who doesn't want to show are, in my opinion, bigger than someone that, okay, man, let's see. Well, I'll catch a plane to Madrid. You catch a plane to Madrid. We'll have dinner and then we'll get back next day. That's okay. That's normal. It's a normal business trip. We have good dinner and a good conversation. And that's how I like to work. I like to know people, and you don't know someone just because you had a meal with them. But when you spend many, many hours in a poker room, you will have some expectancy of what that people will do or will not do for you, I think.
But it's part of the game. And just as somebody might, on a smaller scale, have people opening accounts for them, I think obviously it goes on extensively. And it might be a small sum and they don't get paid, just as it does much larger sums for bigger groups. All right, so that concludes part one of my chat with Jose Ribeiro. And I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be releasing part two shortly after. You can find that on the Smart Betting Club podcast feed. So look out for that. And we'll catch up with more on what Jose had to say in part two.